Welcome to Hood War Stories. In this episode, I'll be discussing the life of Half Ounce. Latarisha O'Brien was born on October 24th in the year 1989. He grew up in Inglewood, California, in the area surrounding Rogers Park. Rapping has always been his passion since a young age. At the age of 11, he was introduced to Exhibit, who acted as his mentor. Exhibit showed him the ropes and brought him into the music industry. Through Exhibit, Half Ounce linked with the group Strong Arm Steady. There he got tight with Mitchie Slick and would eventually join his Wrong Kind record label. In the early 2000s, Half Ounce would join the neighborhood Pirus, a Black American gang located in Inglewood, California. He went by the hood name Half Pint and was allegedly super active during his time gangbanging. He was in and out of juvie and wound up in youth authority for a loaded stolen firearm. He continued to have run-ins with the law and would end up down for a murder charge, which he ultimately beat. In the 2000s, Inglewood was still one of the more dangerous pockets of Los Angeles County and carried the leftover heat from the gang wars of the 90s. Half Ounce was frontline and gained battle scars during his time in the field. On one occasion, a rival gang member stabbed him 12 times near the intersection of Victor Avenue and Venice Way. The enemy left him for dead on the corner trembling. Half Ounce managed to survive. At the hospital, the police came and tried to ask him some questions regarding the attack. Not willing to cooperate, Half Ounce discharged himself the same day. In a different incident, Half Ounce was riding his bike dressed in all red attire when a rival gang member spotted him and ran him over with his car. The rival then put his car in reverse and ran him over again, nearly killing him. He was in a coma for 18 days. When he woke up, he had to stay in a rehab center for 18 months. He lost a lot of memory. It was like he was a newborn baby. The only person he could remember was his mother, and his mother was going through a double during this period. Her mother died the same day Half Ounce got ran over by a car. In the rehabilitation center, they worked on regaining his memory and ability to walk again. But after 18 months, he was still wheelchair bound. He grew impatient and ended up cutting off his cast. From then on, he would walk with a permanent limp. Half Ounce began rapping seriously in the 2010s, carving out a spot for himself in the Inglewood rap scene. He dropped projects such as Preliminary Hearing, with standout tracks like Roll Call. He later began promoting a trilogy series titled The Trial, The Verdict, and The Sentence, aiming to narrate his life through the metaphor of a courtroom. In 2017, he dropped Neighborhood Politics, which many consider his most polished work to date, featuring artists like Mitchie Slick and Compton Menace. Behind the music, Half Ounce was a father and a husband. As his music gained traction, he was also working a full-time job at UPS to support his family. Friends and family said that he was determined to do right and move away from the chaos of his earlier years. He enrolled at UEI College to study heating and air conditioning, planning to build a stable career while pursuing his passion to rap. By this stage, he was married and had 3 children. His wife was also pregnant with their 4th child when tragedy struck. On October 22nd, 2022, at around 11:14 p.m., Half Ounce and a friend left his apartment in Koreatown. They drove off in his '07 Benz. Half Ounce's vehicle had been parked on the street facing northbound on New Hampshire Avenue north of his apartment complex. At approximately 11:22 p.m., a dark SUV parks on the street directly behind the space where Half Ounce's Benz had been parked. At approximately 11:35 p.m., Half Ounce and his friend returned to the area and parked the Benz in the same spot they had left from, unaware of the black SUV behind them. When Half Ounce and his friend exit the Benz and begin walking casually southbound towards his apartment, the suspect's vehicle conducts a U-turn and begins to follow the pair. The suspect's vehicle then drives past Half Ounce and his friend, parks just south of 725 New Hampshire Avenue. The driver shuts the lights off, seemingly to avoid detection. The passenger of the suspect's vehicle exits the car and appears to hide behind a vehicle parked on the street. When Half Ounce and his friend reach 725 New Hampshire Avenue, the muzzle flash from a gun can be observed on the surveillance footage from the street near the area where the passenger suspect had been hiding. After being struck by gunfire, Half Ounce turns and runs towards the planter at the front of the building. Half Ounce's friend flees the area northbound on foot. A few moments later, a suspect wearing a ski mask and armed with a handgun emerges from the street and follows Half Ounce to the planter where he had been hiding. The suspect lifts up his mask to show Half Ounce's face, stands over him, and fires multiple rounds around close range before fleeing back to the vehicle. Half Ounce would succumb from his injuries. He was 32 years old. Just moments before he was ambushed, Half Ounce had been on a FaceTime call with his pregnant wife. She became alarmed when she heard what she believed to be gunshots over the phone. She immediately dialed 911 and rushed to his apartment. The two did not live together at that time. When detectives spoke with his wife, she advised them that she believes Half Ounce was potentially murdered by his play brother Anthony King, also known as Tony Montana V, from Black Pea Stone Jungles. Sometime during the summer of 2022, Half Ounce had called Anthony and asked for a ride because Half Ounce was having some car trouble. Anthony drove Half Ounce to the Ladera shopping center where he met with an acquaintance and loaned her a few $100s. She observed at that time that Half Ounce had been wearing expensive jewelry and was carrying about $60,000 in cash. After leaving the Ladera Center, Anthony told Half Ounce he wanted to stop by the hood and drove Half Ounce to a secluded alley in the jungles. A few moments later, an unidentified suspect carrying 2 handguns ran up to Half Ounce's window and demands his property. Half Ounce provided the suspect with the currency, and the suspect began to walk away. Half Ounce's suspicion that Anthony was involved in the robbery heightened when Anthony urged Half Ounce to give the suspect his jewelry after the suspect began to walk away, stating the jewelry was not worth his life. Following the robbery, Half Ounce and Anthony became engaged in an escalating feud on Instagram. When Half Ounce had began telling people that Anthony had set him up to be robbed, Anthony responded by characterizing him as a snitch. Half Ounce responded by circulating a photo mock-up of Anthony with a private part in his mouth. In response, Anthony sent Half Ounce a picture of Half Ounce's mother's apartment. In a series of text messages, Half Ounce seemed to later forgive Anthony for the robbery. Anthony responds to Half Ounce by telling him to never make a move on the chessboard unless you can counter it with 5 more moves. The game revolves around outthinking your opponents. Stop playing baby boy and go run and hide and make you come out that little hole you've been hiding in. When Half Ounce asked Anthony why was he sending him pictures of his mother's apartment, Anthony responded with, "Never tell someone you're going to kill them, and take your word back." A criminal background check revealed Anthony was on parole for robbery and has prior arrests for resisting an officer, assault with a deadly weapon, and narcotic sales. In late December of 2022, Anthony King and Dennis Rissener were arrested at 2 separate locations in Long Beach. Both were charged with Half Ounce's murder and the attempted murder of his friend, while Anthony faces an additional weapons charge. Half Ounce had seemed to turn his life around and was distancing himself from the negativity when he was tragically gunned down. His legacy in Inglewood is stamped, and his memory is still being honored. I'd like to thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.